Hi everybody, my name's Cam Shea and this is Lucy O'Brien.
Hello.
From the IGN Australia team. And we're having a chat today about Burial at Sea, Episode 1. Mm-hmm. That's BioShock Infinite, for those who don't know. I don't know how you got here if that's the case. I played
They just took a stab in the dark.
Yep, we've both played through a chunk of the DLC. I've played through to the end of Part 1. Which took me a little over 2 hours. I was stopping to smell the roses quite a bit though. And you played a little less than that, so you didn't see the crazy stuff that I saw, but we can't actually talk about anyway, so whatevs. Let's just start from the very beginning. I mean, you would have seen 2K release the first 5 minutes of the DLC as a video online. So hopefully you've seen that already, and it opens. The opening is just so strong, and such a bizarre kind of fusion of these characters that we know and love from Infinite, transplanted to Rapture in like 1958, pre-fall Rapture, and Booker's a detective. He's got his own kind of agency, and knock on the door, and who comes in but Elizabeth.
What I think is really cool about the opening is just how confident it is. There's no sort of over-explanation. There's no kind of, and here we are in another kind of BioShock reality. Right. You know, it's very much like, this is an entirely different reality, and you guys are going to have to keep up.
Yep. And it's this classic kind of film noir opening, kind of muted colours. She comes in, he's like, what can I do for you? And she's like, hey, how about you start with a light? Puts a cigarette in her lips, he clicks his fingers, flames, spark off the end of his fingers, he lights a cigarette, and then it begins.
Yeah.
And so it's this very kind of like, and the dialogue's very kind of short and snappy and
it's that kind of quick-fire, hard-boiled dialogue that sort of airs on the side of almost caricature, but in a brilliant way.
Yeah.
Like it's slightly over the top, slightly kind of aware of itself.
Yeah.
But I really dug that. And I dug that overall.
Transplanted into that kind of style of dialogue and that style of world.
Yeah, it's very much a shift in genre, like a really obvious jump in genre from Infinite and from the original BioShock. I mean, this feels like it's a genre, like BioShock Noir. It's a genre game all of a sudden.
Except that, like, it begins with a very definite sense of that kind of genre, but then you go outside Booker's office and suddenly you're in pre-fall Rapture. It's this glorious world, all the Art Deco architecture and everything.
Yeah.
And I love the use of colour in the opening, however long it is before you get into any kind of combat. It's very, like, brassy kind of oranges and these incredible kind of luminous kind of greens and blues, and this hazy kind of lighting that just gives it like an almost dreamy kind of quality. And it's just so cool seeing this city kind of truly kind of alive for the first time.
And I think, for those of us who have been BioShock fans since the beginning, it's actually incredible to suddenly be in that Rapture that we always imagined. And for me, it looked far more, it was just far more weird. It had a sort of sense of absurdity that I think was above and beyond anything that I was anticipating.
Right, okay.
Like, because, obviously when you play in Rapture and the original BioShock and it's all sort of decrepit and falling apart, you get a sense of what it was like before, but I had no idea it was that this was the actual vision.
Yeah.
And I think it was really something quite incredible.
Yeah. But I mean, they do a really good job of kind of introducing to this vibrant kind of place that feels as though it's in its prime, and then quickly kind of, reveal that that's an artifice. And so they kind of center the DLC around the conflict between Andrew Ryan and Fontaine.
Yeah.
And the kind of downfall of Fontaine, and his department store's been sunk to even to the bottom of the ocean. And it's become a prison, and so that's kind of where they managed to have their cake and eat it too. You get to experience Rapture pre-fall, but then they also get to take you to much more familiar kind of dank BioShock style environments with splices and all the combat and all that kind of stuff. It's a kind of neat juxtaposition of the two elements, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as well as that, this is still a BioShock Infinite game. I mean, it's still got a real sort of... BioShock Infinite is still very much there, even though you are in the world of BioShock the original. Which I really appreciated, because immediately, I wasn't sure how they were going to balance the two, but it really does feel like BioShock and BioShock Infinite had like made really sweet love.
So, So what were your impressions of kind of where the characters were coming from? Because I've seen more of how things play out than you have. At first Elizabeth it seems very kind of mysterious and enigmatic, and but you get these kind of a lot of teasers about Columbia, about Infinite, and you get the sense that there's some dialogue about Booker kind of not really knowing what year he came to Rapture, and there's some ambiguity around why he's there, what his past is, and same with Elizabeth. She doesn't kind of answer his questions about why are you here, because she walks into his office and it kind of flips the Noir kind of thing on its head a little bit, because Elizabeth is the instigator of the story, but she's also the driving force behind the story. Because the story is all about this girl Sally, who has gone missing. Booker thinks she's dead and trying to find her, and Elizabeth is the person who's bring renewed impetus to that search, whereas Booker's kind of given up. There's a line of dialogue in there where he said, he was trying to find out what happened to this girl that he'd grown attached to, and he tied a man to a chair and asked him in no uncertain terms for 15 hours, but didn't get anywhere with it. So I kind of like the way that Elizabeth drives things along. But how did you feel about those two characters in this world, and what was your impression of why they were there, and some of the hints that were being dropped about the links between Rapture and Columbia?
Well, what I really liked is that at the beginning they both came across as I was saying, it goes back to that kind of sense of they were almost playing up to archetypes. They were almost playing up to these stereotypes, I guess, of noir characters. And she, Elizabeth is very mysterious. She's got this beautiful cigarette that this long sort of line of smoke comes down every single time she takes it away from her mouth. It's like she's very much that kind of mysterious Hitchcockian, is that even a word, woman. And
she's immaculate,
She is absolutely immaculate. And Booker is, your typical faceless, hard-boiled detective. But as you progress throughout the game, they start becoming far more familiar, and you start getting that sense of Booker and Elizabeth as they were in BioShock Infinite. And Elizabeth in particular, I mean, Booker strikes me, as you say, as very confused. He's not quite sure. He's having visions. He's kind of slightly displaced. Whereas Elizabeth starts becoming far less of that mysterious, confident woman, and far more of the Elizabeth that we remember from BioShock Infinite, without spoiling too much.
Yeah, but she still doesn't give Booker a huge amount to work with.
No.
He's kind of saying, "Why are you here?" And she's like, "Well, I'm in the debt collecting business."
Yeah,
you kind of got to muse on that.
And what I really dig about that is that she's really driving the show in this game. Whereas in the beginning, in BioShock Infinite, she's this vulnerable sort of prisoner who Booker rescues. And in Burial at Sea, she's very much the sort of the leader.
I mean, you're not actually following waypoints for a lot of it. You're actually following her.
Yeah.
She's like, I've got a lead for you. We're going this way.
Yeah.
And I like that dynamic.
Yeah, so do I.
But there's all sorts of really cool little nods to Infinite that people will pick up on as they play. Like, she's got the bird pin at her neck. The first time she sees a skyhook, she refers to it as such, and Booker's like, "Skyhook? You mean the sky grabber?" And then she kind of just says to herself, what was it?
Oh, constants and variables.
Yeah, she says constants and variables. She's kind of musing to herself a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's all these little cool nods to Infinite in there that fans are going to really love. And, without saying too much, it's... Infinite was a very complex kind of story, a lot of room for interpretation, and a storyline that you're going to kind of think about for quite a while. And this is exactly the same. There's a lot of meat to kind of chew on here. It's really cool. Yeah,
no, I think so too. And I think that, very, very much, like this does feel to me to be sort of where they can go with DLC from now on, because it feels slightly like, you know, to play on the game's name, it feels like they could make infinite chapters along these sorts of lines. You know, you could put these two characters in any kind of circumstance and they'd still be quite compelling.
Yeah. So how did you feel about the actual combat? Because for me, when the combat kind of kicked in, I was almost like, oh no, because it breaks up the storytelling, it breaks up the narrative. You know, you have a period of combat and then you get back to the conversation, then you get back to kind of trying to piece together what's going on here.
Well, that's always been one of the biggest criticisms, I guess, you know, about the BioShock series, is that frequently people just want to soak up the world.
I almost wish...
And don't really care about the
this DLC was just an adventure game.
Yeah.
You know, just like strip the... I mean, I don't know, the combat absolutely has its place. It brings tension, and, you know, you can kind of have spring-loaded cats and, you know, some surprises along the way. But
and the splices themselves are, you know, they're interesting characters. They're these sort of demented kind of muttering... They're the splices we've come to know and love.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed that the first chunk of the DLC was very much non-combat focused, and was just like allowing you to sort of walk around and soak up this incredible world. The combat is as it's always been, kind of a momentary forgettable distraction, I suppose.
Yeah, there's some kind of neat little new additions here, like you know, there's a new weapon, Tommy gun. There's a new plasmid that you come across. But what I liked the most actually was some of the new gear.
Yeah, and there was a lot of gear in that in that DLC.
Yeah.
I found a lot of gear.
So yeah, the two that I really liked, one was melee, which gave you like 3 times the reach with a melee strike and twice the damage, but you lost 25% of your shield every time you connected.
Yep.
Which I thought was a really good kind of trade-off. And the other one I really liked, effectively every bullet you fire from a gun has a chance of adding some kind of like elemental plasmid kind of damage. So you kind of, you know, with the Tommy gun, you're shooting at an enemy and they're getting frozen and being electrocuted, and that kind of like was quite a cool little inclusion to me. So yeah, I think there's a bit it's gonna be fun kind of digging into the gear a little bit more in this one.
Yeah, and you know, we've got this new plasmid, of course, which everyone's been talking about, this Old Man Winter, which is essentially just a kind of reskinned version of the original Frost plasmid, the name of which I've currently forgotten.
Frosty, Old Man Frosty.
Old Man Frosty.
They're not very good at naming these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's essentially the same thing. You sort of shoot up, you Frosty the snow plasmid, you freeze an enemy, and then you can, you know, shoot him or melee him into pieces.
Or you solve a puzzle by like freezing some water that's and you can walk up it and, you know, hey, we might as well turn a valve, am I right?
It's the same old.
But you know what? Who cares? The combat's fine. And the story is just and the world is just so immersive. I love what they've done. There's all these like little touches, like as I was saying before, Elizabeth is so immaculate when she walks into your office the first time. But then you go through some stuff, and she, you know, it's that kind of, it's heroes that are, you know, kind of fallible in a bunch of different ways. So the next thing you kind of notice that, you know, her shirt's a little untucked, and she's kind of scuffed. She's
got a rip on the corner of her shirt.
Yeah, it's those little things that really make all the difference. And one other thing we should just quickly talk about. I've already mentioned like how beautiful the world is, but there's some really, really striking art direction in this game.
It is. For me, I was more blown away by the art direction in this game than I was when I got my hands on Infinite for the first time. Like I don't know whether that's because I'm just so familiar now with both games. Even though I can't remember plasmids and... Anyway, you know, and it really really blew me away. And again, that art direction coupled with that fantastic soundtrack, you know, you're totally right there with these characters.
But the art direction is very much used to serve the characterization as well. Like there's this club that you go into, run by this kind of crazy artist called, his last name's Cohen, and to kind of gain, you gain entry.
Well, it's Sander Cohen.
Yes, so.
Yes, from who we know,
Yep.
who we are familiar with. But everyone's slightly different in this game.
But yeah, it's first you go through this stark white room, then you go through this kind of dark corridor, and then you emerge out into this club where there's like a huge kind of sculpture of his head leering down at you, and there's it's a projection of his face on it, making different expressions. And then there's kind of like a spiral staircase down to this stage where he's painting, and there's this couple dancing. We don't want to obviously give too much more away, but it's just beautifully realized. It's just so such a unique kind of space, and so in keeping with his character. And then that leads into like a really kind of interesting moment between Booker and Elizabeth that just has so much more weight and depth to it than you get in the entire course of most video games.
Yeah.
Like
And all those classic BioShock themes are there, themes of power, powerful people being narcissistic and insane. It's, agency, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really, really excited by it, and I think it's going to be a really, really strong piece of DLC.
I completely agree. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, but let's not
spoil anymore.
Yep. Anyway, so the ending is